Rape, murder, war. They all have one thing in common. Men. Aggression, violence, ambition unchecked by conscience, all the stuff of toxic masculinity.
Oh crap, men are toxic? But I'm a man, and toxic is bad, like toxic waste. If waste hurts people, have I been hurting people? Wait, heavy metals are toxic? But my car is metal and it's heavy. I need my car to run errands and compensate for my penis. Toxic household items, but I live in a house. I don't, what am I gonna do? Okay, take a breath, Sam. You can do this. We can move to a yurt. Hopefully yurt-hold items aren't toxic. Toxic substances? I can't have substances in my yurt? Toxic behaviors? I have to stop doing things? Toxic people? My friends and family are people. Toxic water? That's not good. I have water in my body. I have to get to the hospital. I have to get the water out. But how are they going to do that? Doctors are people who do things with substances. We're screwed. And it's all men's fault. Stupid men. Hey, hooligan, I'm Sam. Let's mince words. You've probably heard the term toxic masculinity, but what does it mean? If I make out with my wife, should she call poison control or induce vomiting? I don't know. I do know a lot of people really hate the term. In fact, all that hate may have prompted the Gillette razor company to create a short film a few months ago. I suppose technically every TV commercial is a short film, but the one I see most often lately is this.
Do you use catheters? Are you using the catheter that's really best for you?
Oh yeah!
If I had not tried the samples from Liberator, I might never have found the perfect catheter for me. Now that I've found the best catheter for me, it's made my life much easier.
How did catheters go from something to avoid to a daily routine like coffee or cat videos? But I'm getting off track. Short film or not, Gillette's ad from January is what some people call outrage marketing, a term that deserves its own video, and luckily it already has one. In short, Gillette made the ad to take the piss out of bro culture because they know certain people are pissed off by the phrase toxic masculinity. So what was it the haters were hating out about? Let's have a look.
Bullying.
The Me Too movement against sexual
Toxic
harassment.
masculinity.
Is this the best a man can get? Is it? We can't hide from it.
Sexual harassment is taking over.
It's been going on far too long. We can't laugh it off.
Who's the daddy?
What I actually think she's trying to say.
Making the same old excuses.
Boys will be boys. Boys will be boys. Boys will be boys.
Okay, I think we know why this pissed off some folks. To be honest, I think Gillette's underlying statement ought to be fairly uncontroversial. Hey, as men, we could probably do better. As a man myself, I see it as just another step in a long evolution where we work on things like the remarkably high number of women globally who are murdered by a usually male intimate partner, and also the higher rates of suicide among men. As I pointed out in the cold open, some people object because they think the phrase toxic masculinity describes all men. By that reasoning, if I mention having blue balls, that means every man in the world is sexually frustrated because, gee, they all have balls, so all their balls must also be blue. Because that's how adjectives work. All twins are evil. Do they have any other objections?
I've watched the Gillette ad. I've seen all the comments and all the controversy around it. I've fucking had enough of this term toxic masculinity. It's a made-up word.
Talk about toxic masculinity. You'll be the poster boy for that shit.
Well, there's just so many dumb phrases like that, you know?
Yeah, well, they're made up.
Yes, that's how language works. Words and phrases are made up. They're called neologisms. If you want people to only use words that aren't made up, all you're left with is onomatopoeia like whack, hiss, click, crash, bang, boom, and thud. No! So like the vocabulary of action movies? I guess some men wouldn't notice.
Is there anything at all you'd like to say to the television audience, Batman?
Actress Meryl Streep criticized the use of the term toxic masculinity, arguing that toxicity is a trait that afflicts both sexes.
You suffer from a horrific disease. Maleness. There is a cure. Anti-man.
Organized attempt to de-emphasize masculinity or to punish masculinity. Why?
If you're part of toxic masculinity, if your competitive drive is regarded as part of a tyrannical impulse, if the heritage to which you belong is regarded as an oppressive patriarchy.
Since the #MeToo movement, toxic masculinity, as it lumps all men as seemingly criminal, and also feeds off the idea of male privilege and entitlement, which many men do not believe exists.
The solution is obvious. Make men
energy
less
is
toxic.
male
Make men less masculine. Make men more like Christ.
are a bad masculine.
So no, their only objection to the phrase toxic masculinity is thinking it means all men are bad. Except that's not how adjectives work. And why don't they respond that way when someone says bad men? It may not be the same idea, but don't those two ideas share a bathroom? Or at least live near enough to steal each other's Wi-Fi?
Is there an upside to masculinity? So let's say a hostile power tries to invade the country. That's the point when you'd want to have some toxic masculinity around, right? The whole point is to go kill people in order to protect us.
The devaluation of masculinity won't end well because feminine, passive men don't stop evil. The same masculine traits that bring destruction also defeat tyranny.
Brave men gave their lives to prevent fascism and tyranny from engulfing our world in 1914 and 1939. That was masculinity doing good.
Being masculine is the reason why we don't speak German, okay? Stop.
Thanks for implying that I only exist to be a sperm donor and physically fight Nazis to stop genocide. No pressure! I guess in the meantime you can hang my balls in the coat rack until you need my fists or a little neologism. But PragerU is right. You can't overcome tyranny without violence. Just look at Martin Luther King. He refused to bust shit up, and where did that ever get the civil rights movement? This talk of needing men to fight Nazis seems familiar. Where have I heard...
And those are the bad guys.
What?
The Germans. Come on, we need to get out of here.
No, that's not it.
You are not fit to be a king!
That's closer.
From the 17th century onward, it steadily expanded against the much larger Ashanti and Yoruba kingdoms.
The Mino was an all-female military regiment of the Fon people of the Kingdom of Dahomey.
They were feared throughout Africa for 2 centuries.
That's what I'm talking about.
They were ferocious fighters, with a reputation for decapitating soldiers in the middle of battle, as well as serving as torturers to those who were unfortunate enough to become their captives.
At the end of the Franco-Dahomean Wars, the French actually did prevail, but only because they brought in the Foreign Legion, who had machine guns.
The French disbanded the Mino Corps after they finally occupied Dahomey in 1894. A historian who followed almost 24 of them afterwards said they all had difficulty adjusting to civilian life. They started fights that scared their neighbors and families. Women can be just as aggressive, protective, or leadery as men. History is full of matriarchal human societies, although they tend to be more egalitarian. Matriarchal societies don't usually define men as the literal property of women.
Under the legal principle of coverture, actually, husbands held authority over the person, property, and choices of their wives. Actual story titles from early 19th century American women's magazines like Woman, A Being to Come Home To, and Woman, Man's Best Friend.
Most of our behavior is socially constructed. Women still struggle to attain leadership positions in our culture because our culture says stupid shit like, leadership is masculine, as a holdover from the Victorian era's cult of domesticity. We now have a record number of women in Congress, and they're still outnumbered by men 3-to-1. Beyond the understanding that testosterone makes men slightly more muscular and aggressive, biologists and anthropologists haven't found any compelling evidence that much of this is somehow related to Y chromosomes or my ability to take the piss standing up.
Are you using the catheter that's really best for you?
Fuck off. Go hawk your penis irrigation somewhere else. As I said, the gender gap in American politics isn't because of innate differences between the sexes. On the other hand, cultural programming is damned hard to shake, and there's a long and painful history of us men stroking our own egos by dumping on women.
A sewing machine is really an amazing invention, especially when you stop to think that a man invented it.
The origin of the word hysteria comes from the word hystera, the Greek word for uterus. Now, if that connection is weird to you, that's because in the Victorian days, hysteria was something that was only applied to women. It was used as a diagnosis for everything from epileptic fits to fevers to coarse language. It was a Victorian-era version of bitches be trippin'. But this isn't a purely Victorian assumption. In the Middle Ages, they attributed hysteria to demonic possession because, of course they did, and they thought that women were more susceptible to demonic possession because the vagina was an entry point for demons. Because of course it was.
The answer to toxic masculinity isn't less masculinity. It's better masculinity. The growing problem in today's society isn't that men are too masculine. It's that they're not masculine enough.
They need to become more masculine, not less. Masculinity is not the cause of the problem, it is the fucking cure.
People aren't telling men to stop being men or to stop being masculine, competitive, or assertive. Plus, there are plenty of confident, competitive women like the US women's soccer team, and outside of a few isolated assholes, nobody's telling them to get back in the kitchen either. We're just asking some men to stop being douches, and to stop letting douchebaggery slide when they see it. It's not competitiveness or a love of sports ball that inspires men, and specifically men, to catcall women on the street.
When Charlie sees a lovely girl, a girl like yours or mine, he uses a whistle, a wink, and wild root. It gets her every time.
Nobody's demanding we let women decorate your man cave with flowers because we think that's going to stop you mansplaining at work. I'm starting to think we're using different definitions of masculinity.
For every bad deed that a man commits in the world, I would propose that well over 1,000 good deeds are carried out by other masculine men every day.
Assertiveness, honesty, courage, and especially responsibility.
When a man works 10 hours a day to feed, clothe, and shelter his family, that is masculinity doing good.
The thing that's holding up this world.
When a surgeon saves a person's life through open heart surgery, that is masculinity doing good.
These masculine men around the world who are doing the hard work, protecting their families.
When a young man shields his sweetheart with his jacket when it rains, that is masculinity doing good.
Masculinity is either healthy or it's not masculinity.
When Alexander Fleming invented penicillin, saving millions of lives, that was masculinity doing good.
You tell people to stop being masculine, they stop being honest, they stop being courageous, they stop being assertive, they stop being all the things that prevent the darkness from taking over.
When a man takes his daughter to school, gives her a kiss and wishes her a good day, that is masculinity doing good.
Yeah, well, you know, that's just like your opinion, man.
If you think the phrase toxic masculinity must describe all men, and then ascribe everything you think is good in the world to men or masculinity, how can you not be seen as insulting and degrading women?
Strong with this one, the patriarchy is.
This is right in line with all the ways men have marginalized women for centuries, saying they're dumb and weak and need to be subservient, and they can't be leaders, providers, or protectors.
I can remember the good old days when there were all men in my department, and we didn't have these problems.
Woman is to win everything by peace and love, by making herself so much respected, esteemed, and loved that to yield to her opinions and to gratify her wishes will be the free will offering of the heart. But the moment woman begins to feel the promptings of ambition or the thirst for power, her aegis of defense is gone. All the sacred protection of religion, all the generous promptings of chivalry, all the poetry of romantic gallantry depend upon woman's retaining her place as dependent and defenseless, and making no claims and maintaining no right but what are the gifts of honor, rectitude, and love. It wasn't a dude! It was apparently Harriet Beecher Stowe's sister, Catherine.
Congratulations to Katie Bowman, to whom we owe the first photograph of a black hole ever. Women who have contributed to science in the past have often been ignored and purposefully forgotten. The misogynists of Reddit, of course, put on their detective hats The viral black hole photo was originally released in 2017. The incredibly talented female superhero scientist merely inverted the image in Photoshop. Yesterday's release is yet another globo-homo psyop to emasculate men. Well, what if I told you that 40 of the 200 people that took the picture were women? Now where's your masculinity? I assume you think it's in the bathing suit area.
She blinded me with science.
It's a masculine trait responsibility, not just for men, but for women, anyone.
Who died and made you the dictionary?
Bad men don't become good when they stop being men. They become good when they stop being bad. The answer to toxic masculinity isn't less masculinity. It's better masculinity.
Shame. The main reason somebody becomes a sexual predator or a wife beater is because of inner shame. The most ironic thing about all of this is when I finally figured out how to get through to these guys. It's when I discovered that they needed to work on their masculinity.
I agree. I also want men to be better. Speaking of which, while you're listing off all the positive qualities you consider masculine, maybe you could add basic research to that list. Why don't we all agree that real men should Google first before bitching on YouTube? If you'd done some basic research first, maybe you'd have noticed this on Wikipedia. The term toxic masculinity was coined by a men's movement. They made up this term, as you said, because they wanted exactly what you want, to help men feel less anxious and less ashamed of their own masculinity. They were acknowledging that a lot of the shame and anxiety men feel around their masculinity is created by other men.
Toxic masculinity is talked about a lot these days. We would define it as a set of negative behaviours that men think they have to follow in order to be proper men.
When people say, like, toxic masculinity, they don't mean, like, men are evil and stupid or whatever. What they usually mean is that men feel they have to hold themselves to certain social expectations concerning behavior, which lead to bad outcomes. Like, again, holding up your emotions, having to be, like, really aggro and tough all the time. I know I do that.
Hegemonic masculinity is whatever configuration of masculinity is upheld as the standard for men in such a way that maintains male dominance at the expense of marginalized groups, particularly women, men of color, and LGBTQ people.
When it comes to this term, it's really important to understand that it's used to reinforce the fact that there are many different types and formulations of masculinity.
Men are discouraged from expressing their feelings, and too often that comes out as aggression instead. A man can't even cry without becoming a meme. Our traditional view of masculinity doesn't just affect how we treat others, it can also be dangerous to our own mental health.
When I got out and I started noticing my PTSD getting worse, asking for help was hard because I was that tough guy, I was that Marine.
U.S. Marine Corps is launching an investigation after this picture detailing the flight pattern of one of its planes hit social media.
Our workshops encourage boys to critique phrases such as man up and take it like a man, which are really saying boys don't cry and boys don't ask for help when they're feeling down.
To be a football player in high school is to be the proper way of being a man within that social circle. If, by contrast, a boy in high school walked around wearing a skirt, this would be seen as improper and the boy would be bullied for it.
Lessons that have been tested on the battlefield and when implemented.
How can people like this unironically complain about people using the term toxic masculinity?
Listen up, you piece of shit! Life is hard! Here are some lessons! I shoot them!
The mythopoetic men's movement coined the term toxic masculinity to acknowledge that a lot of men were feeling pressure from other men around them to, quote, be a man, by which was meant work out, drink beer, chase women, and play sports ball. If you didn't fit this narrow, macho image of manhood, then men higher up in the pecking order at work or in your friend groups made a point of saying you weren't a quote-unquote real man. Essentially, men into mainstream culture have turned life for a lot of men into a giant pissing contest over things like muscle mass, testosterone, and sperm count.
Are you using the catheter that's really best for you?
Get the fuck out, man. I'm trying to work here. Anyway, as I was saying, be a man is a way for macho men to boost their own self-esteem by shitting on others. especially women and members of the GLBT community.
Toxic masculinity is driven by this overwhelming fear of emasculation. That is to say, the fear of being perceived by others as feminine and therefore unmanly.
They must be providers or they are failures. They must be protectors or they are failures. They must be number one because number two is just the first loser. They must be horny or they're lesser men. They must like competition or they are weak.
In other words, if men don't desire being a toxic asshole, toxic assholes will try their hardest to force them into it regardless. All of this coalesces into a second place is the first loser mentality, where being on top is the only viable option, otherwise you're portrayed as worthless.
This is toxic masculinity. This is men attacking other men by accusing them of being insufficiently macho. It's also misogynistic because it implies that the worst thing a man can be is a woman.
So I want to say, after 20 years, goodbye, Gillette. You fucked me.
Does he look like a bitch?
Quattro, Schick, don't fuck me now. No more Me Too ads.
Does he look like a bitch? No! Then why you try to fuck him like a bitch, Brett?
Anytime you do anything remotely sensitive, heartwarming, anything that's gonna make you more of a loving, caring individual, immediately all your guy friends suggest that maybe, just maybe, you wanna suck a dick. What are you, a fag? Is the reason why guys drop at 55 out of fucking nowhere. It's literally from 5 decades of just suppressing the urge to like hug a puppy, admit a baby's cute, say you want a cookie. You just gotta keep pushing it down like, fuck that, I'm not sucking dick, I'm not sucking dick.
Peer pressure to conform to a narrow definition of masculinity hurts everyone. It reinforces misogynist stereotypes, and it encourages men to do things like not go to the doctor because they think they have to be macho and tough it out when they're hurting, or their prostate is swollen and they can't take the piss.
Are you using the catheter that's really best for you?
Fuck off already! Nowhere is the social illness of toxic masculinity more obvious than in the rhetoric of self-proclaimed alpha males, who reason we can cleanly divide the world's men between a small number of dominant alpha male winners who fuck, and everyone else who are beta cuck soy boy losers who remain virgins their entire lives.
Today we're talking about men in response to their video called Alpha Males Do Not Exist.
Hey everybody, I'm the Ranting Monkey, and today a beta is going to tell us why alphas don't exist.
Basically, Adam is a pretentious, liberal gay dude who overdresses, has ridiculous hair, and worst of all, tries to sound smart and informed.
Actually, research shows that agreeableness, kindness, and generosity are among the strongest indicators of a long, happy relationship.
Oh my god, that's the gayest shit I've ever heard.
Fuck that, I'm not sucking dick, I'm not sucking dick.
The average size of a penis is roughly 10% smaller than it was 50 years ago. And the researchers say air pollution is why. I don't buy this. I think it's feminism. It has to be the feminazis. The new castrati, that's basically men with no guts.
So is castrati a play on words for castrate?
Yeah. It has to do with lack of manhood. New castrati is simply the creative term employed by me, the de facto head of the Republican Party, with my entertainer hat on.
Part of the problem with alpha males, as just one small aspect of overall toxic masculinity, is their desperate need to shit on anyone they can describe as not alpha. Their self-worth depends on a winners and losers dichotomy in which others, like gay men, women, and quote-unquote betas, are inferior to the alphas. Limbaugh's quote-unquote new castrati is just one example of the long history of macho men using insults like homo, no balls, or prison rape jokes as a kind of dike to support their own egos.
The stereotypical narrative is that men should want to be physically strong, sexually aggressive, emotionally locked down, and incapable of any sense of vulnerability.
What do you collect, Vaseline? Oh.
Okay, let's do it.
What? Ah!
No, Jake, not like this! Ah!
Love is in the air.
Notice how these jokes are all designed to demean, humiliate, or emasculate a male character for being the victim, or potential victim of sexual violence. The idea behind the joke here is as obvious as it is toxic, that men who aren't tough or manly enough to avoid being victimized are pathetic, and therefore deserving of ridicule or worse.
Hegemonic masculinity is specifically masculinity that runs on the logic of power and domination. And in this sense, it is better to be a bully than it is to be bullied, according to the logic of hegemonic masculinity.
Emasculation jokes are supposed to be funny because, in a patriarchal culture like ours, we're meant to think that there is no greater humiliation for a man than to be treated like a woman.
I am the strongest, most aggressive male, so I am the alpha.
Yeah, here's the thing about alphas. They never have to say, I'm an alpha. In fact, saying that is a very beta thing to do. It's false confidence, and people see right through it.
Yeah, people see right through that shit, like this beta cuck.
Many people just mean an alpha is a confident and dominant dude, like myself.
That is why you fail.
Because again, alphas are confident, and part of that is not caring what everyone thinks. This is also why he keeps saying right here, right. He says that more and more as he goes on. It's because Adam knows he's met his match, but you're not right, so you have to tell people you're right all the time to try and desperately convince us.
The irony is he's reading into a common verbal tic saying it reveals insecurity. But if we're talking about insecurity, what does it say about a person when they can't go a full minute without calling someone a beta cuck soy boy or otherwise insulting them? I'm not talking about making jokes about their arguments, I mean generic, playground-style, you're a fat loser insults.
And this probably comes from, again, Adam being a weak, prissy, loser beta.
That's a little beta who sucked his way up to the top. Beta males are going to go to bars and repeat the stupid shit you said to women, and they're still not going to get fucked.
What I'm seeing here is Adam is clearly a beta soy boy.
We'd also accept cuck Adam and get away from me, Adam, I like men. You're kind of a dirty little bitch. You're not going to win a lot of time running around looking like your favorite pastime, and that's okay. They already have a pussy and that's one another.
Smart guy beta.
If you're curious why quote-unquote alpha males need this destructive worldview, there's a deep dive on that in another recent video of mine. In the meantime, I'm sharing more of this alpha male talk, partly because I think debunking it is helpful in combating the effects of toxic masculinity. And secondly, as a comedian, I think these alpha male jokers are hysterical.
This narrow masculine script is often presented as naturalistic, or a bio-truth, something that's an emergent property of biology and thus immune to criticism.
When people talk about alpha males and beta males, right, they're specifically bringing in the language of biology, of evolutionary psychology, you know?
No, I don't know. I've never heard anyone mentioning alphas who was also bringing in evolution specifically.
You've never heard anybody talk about alpha males that way? You mean you've never met this guy?
Wolves don't have an alpha hierarchy at all. They're just parents.
Well, I hate to question academic research, but I think alphas are the ones who get to fuck and become daddy wolves. At least that's how it kind of works for humans.
Funny, it seems like those guys have a lot in common. I'd think they'd get along famously. Somebody should hook them up. But no bullshit, no science. Just look how he tears up Conover's carefully cited sources.
Liberals like to deny science and facts, or sometimes even try and change them to fit their narrative. My original video and rebuttal to Adam's alphas don't exist nonsense, well, that video is one of my top ones, with over 700,000 views, so I think our side might be more accurate here. It got 750,000 views, so yeah, I certainly think a lot more people agree with my more reasonable side of this. You are the one who made this pseudo-intellectual show, trying to debunk stuff and sound smart, yet all I've seen you do is oversimplify things so you can turn them into straw men that you can easily tear down. Simply pathetic, Adam. College humor should be embarrassed, and Adam's Ruin Everything should be cancelled.
Take that, guy with a TV show. No, wait, a TV show that should be cancelled because some people saw an anonymous bullhead guy on YouTube disagree with you. Science! Fewer than saw Conover's video, but that's not the point. Conover's supposed to be an expert, and just look how he presents himself.
And sure, being stubborn and holding your ground on something can seem confident and bold, but when you're wrong about that, it just makes you look like a bullheaded loser like Adam. And this is an especially bad look for Adam considering the image he has built for himself online, on TV, and with his show.
No bullshit doesn't even seem to notice the irony of his bullhead avatar. The thing that produces the bullshit he promises not to have. I guess it's not technically a bull, but a minotaur is part bull, so his channel should really be called Some Bullshit.
20 years later, Meech tried to replicate his research in the wild.
Those aren't dominant wolves. Wolves don't have an alpha hierarchy at all.
So you're making it sound as though the alpha wolf thing doesn't actually exist. It does, but it only exists in captivity. Humans don't live in the wild anymore.
He's right. A suburban household with indoor plumbing and air conditioning is captivity. I'm always trying to escape my captors and growling at guys in the produce section at the grocery store. They need to know I'm in charge of the scarce food our captors give us.
Confident people are the ones who decided to, hey, let's break away from Britain and make our own country, the United States of America. It wasn't pussy-ass beta males who play StarCraft in their parents' basement.
Well, shit. Who's gonna tell the Marine Corps brass at Quantico their new officer training tool is only fit for pussy-ass beta cuck soy boys who don't even lift? What's that? They've been using it for 7 years. My God, what have we done?
You might be the dominant male here, but if you were playing Dungeons and Dragons,
It's your turn.
I attack with my sword.
Your sword? You are a magic user. Do you see a sword on your character sheet?
No.
Well, then you can't attack with a sword, can you, freak?
Unlike animals, no one is the same type of person in all situations. Human society is much more complicated than that.
But in your little Dungeons and Dragons scenario, there was still clearly an alpha male. Now, granted, he's probably the dungeon master, so he would be the alpha. That's kind of their job. But you didn't show that there wasn't a dominant male figure.
The Dungeon Master is like the host at a party. It's their job to be dominant? What parties are you going to?
Put the nachos down, Brad. You're in my house now, and I will cut a bitch.
You might be a completely different dickhead depending on the situation you're in, but chances are, if those little geeks made fun of bruh like that, he'd have kicked the shit out of them. And the little awkward girl would have wet herself over it. By the way, really good job with all the stereotypes here.
That's why I always say the best place to meet girls is
WWE SmackDown.
And somehow, it's not a stereotype when he says the girl would automatically want to sleep with a guy who beats the crap out of harmless nerds because rude comments about game rules hurt his delicate ego. Toxic masculinity is a social illness, and many of us don't realize we're contributing to it, or that we're harmed by it. I almost never saw a doctor until I was diagnosed with diabetes, and it never occurred to me that living up to masculine stereotypes might have contributed to that. Remember, I asked why people who object to the phrase toxic masculinity don't react the same way to the phrase bad men, and I think I know why. The phrase bad men lets us see the world as a collection of Hollywood-style black and white hats, with clearly defined lines separating good and evil. As long as we can envision villains like Hitler and heroes like John Wayne, not only is the world a much simpler place, but nothing is being asked of us personally. In fact, in a world of Waynes and Hitlers, there's very little difference even between the heroes and the villains. They're both aggressive men who solve every problem by punching or shooting it. The only difference is whether an individual man's violence is for or against genocide, and everyone's fine with that. It becomes uncomfortable for the John Waynes of the world when we ask them to do the work of introspection, to ask, 1, am I contributing to negative stereotypes about women? And 2, am I creating peer pressure for other men to conform to potentially harmful masculine stereotypes like not seeing a doctor? Even though the harm these questions might reveal is accidental, our pride in being protectors results in unhelpful shame around those answers, and the changes they ask of us are scary. In short, social health can be a lot like medical health. Catheters are often uncomfortable, but they can serve an important function: taking the piss.
Now that I've found the best catheter for me, it's made my life much easier.
Hey, Will, I tell you, that's a great penis right there. That's a great penis. Make the Navy proud.
Hey, thanks for watching. I'm Sam. If you laughed or you learned something, please hit that like button down below. It looks like this, and it helps me out quite a bit. Thanks. And if you want to see more videos like this, make sure you subscribe, and don't forget to hit that bell if you really want to subscribe. I mean, if you really want to be notified. And if you want to see more bloopers and sneak peeks and other special content, you can get that on my Patreon, link in the doobly-doo down below. I really enjoy making this comedy for you, and I plan to do it for a long time to come. Thanks for watching. I'm Sam, and I'll see you next time.